Good afternoon to everyone. Before formally starting, I would like to recall that this workshop is being recorded. So if any one of you doesn't want to appear in the videos, please switch off the camera. In any case, the videos will only be available for registered participants. I would also like to go over to the very basic instructions that I'm sure you already know by now, but it's always good to refresh them. You need to, it would be helpful if you rename yourselves with your full name and your organization. For that, you go to the participants list and you click with the right button on the mouse and rename yourself. In this workshop, for time constraints, we will only take questions on the chat. And please remain unmuted for the whole session in order to avoid background noises. For those who don't know me yet, I'm Teresa Pastor. I'm Project Development Manager in EUROPARC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this workshop on outdoor sports. How do we measure the benefits they bring to people and protected areas? It is organized by one of our best partners, the European Network of Outdoor Sports, with whom we have been cooperating for several years now. As a result, we have produced the 10 good principles for outdoor sports in protected areas, which are available in poster and leaflet format in 8 languages. You can find them in our website, in the Knowledge Hub, in the Outdoor Sports session. If you provide us with other translations in other languages, we are very happy to adapt the material. But we also work on the political and advocacy side of things. So just 10 days before the full lockdown, we were lucky enough to organize a joint dissemination event in Brussels, in which we invited Nicolas Notaro, the head of nature of the DG ENV, and Yves Lelostec, the head of sport unit from DG Education and Culture. As Nicolas Notaro said, this is just the beginning of a dialogue between our two communities, so that we can identify a set of concrete actions to do together. And this workshop is one of these. So, with no further ado, I am pleased to introduce Marc Torsios, who is a board member of the European Network of Outdoor Sports and the general manager of IMBA, the International Mountain Bicycling Association of Europe. Formerly, he worked for the Dutch cycling platform on the advocacy for mountain bikes and trail development. Please, Marc, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for this introduction. Welcome everybody to today's program and this workshop that ENOS can deliver today. Before starting, I think it's good to give a short introduction about the ENOS network. The European Network of Outdoor Sports was established as a non-profit organization in 2013, basically because there was no organization actively representing outdoor sports at the European level and building bridges with other sectors and other European stakeholders. And since then, ENOS became a network of European outdoor sports experts, local authorities, federations, universities, and many practitioners and outdoor enthusiasts. The main objectives of the organization are to represent what I've said, the outdoor sports at a strategic level in Europe. So we are there in Brussels. We work with the DG Sport. We're part of expert groups. We promote the benefits that outdoor sports can provide to individuals, to communities, to regions and nations. And that's something we're going to focus on in today's workshops as well. We try to do our best to support the organizations and management of outdoor sports, both at a national and a transnational level, and encouraging transnational approaches to the recognition of leaders and instructors and coaches, and to develop mobility and employment in the sector. And last but not least, I think what's really important from the ENOS network is that we provide a platform for knowledge exchange between all these different members and stakeholders, and that we work together on a number of different European projects. Pretty important milestone that Teresa already referred to was signing an MOU between the ENOS network and the EUROPARC Federation in 2018, if I remember well. The MOU and the corresponding action plan has been a sort of blueprint for all of our initiatives and actions since then between ENOS and the EUROPARC Federation. And the objective of that partnership is to mobilize both networks to promote the practice of responsible outdoor sports in protected areas and minimize their environmental impact. And that's a mission and an objective where we find each other really well. What brings me to today's program. Protecting our landscapes and natural areas is an issue of really significant importance to outdoor sports enthusiasts, and also to those who are there to protect nature and the environment, especially right now in these COVID times where we see an increased number of people visiting nature, not always doing that in the right way. But through the Erasmus project benefits of outdoor sports to society that ENOS undertook over the past few years, we have explored the range of benefits that outdoor sports provide and how to value these effectively in economic terms. So one such benefit was how outdoor sports can connect people to nature, make them appreciate of their natural surrounding, and could lead to a desire to protect and look after it. I think that's a really important goal to strive for. But today we're going to zoom in on how to effectively survey people to assess the ecosystem services an area provides. That's part of the program Halfway. So how do you generate appropriate economic value? What interventions are most effectively to engage people with natural areas? What really makes a difference in making people fall in love and want to look after their local areas? And all those questions, and I hope we can answer a lot of them during this 2-hour session, will be covered by the various speakers and by showing some videos of best practices from the last couple of years. Brings me short to the agenda and the first speaker. Today's agenda, we start with 2 speakers. First with Barbara Eichenschenk from the Technical University of Munich. She's gonna present what the literature tells us about the benefits that outdoor sports create. That presentation is directly followed by nature connectedness, what it is and why it matters. That's done by Professor Miles Richardson. And after these 2 presentations, there's a short Q&A. So if you have a question on your mind, please put it in the chat during those presentations, and then we're going to ask the 2 speakers about them later on. Afterward, we're going to put things in practice. So we're going to focus a little bit more on real life stories. 3 best practices from the BOS project will be shown. Immediately followed by a presentation of Eduard Ingles, who's working at the Catalan National Institute of Physical Education. So he's gonna tell you a little bit more to what kind of questions you need to ask to evaluate your project and measure the benefits of outdoor sports. And later on, followed by our own president or chair, Mike McClure. He's gonna follow that conversation and follow the presentation of Eduard and tell you more about how to generate that social value. After that, there's not a Q&A option. So when we've got the real life stories and those 2 speakers, there's another option to ask some questions through the chat. And then we're gonna finish our afternoon with another real life project from the UK, Stress-Free Trails, presented by Dom Ferris. That's our program in a nutshell. I hope you all enjoy it. Please put your questions in the chat. It would be nice if we get a little bit of interaction today. And brings me to our first presenter, board member of ENOS, colleague, and researcher at the Technical University of Munich, Barbara Eichenschenk. Barbara, please, the floor is yours.
So hello everyone, it's my pleasure to start this workshop now by telling you something about our BOSS project. BOSS stands for Benefits of Outdoor Sports for Society, and I think I tell you nothing new when I tell you that outdoor sports provide a lot of benefits to people. I think you all know that it's a great combination of being outdoors, being physically active, and being in a natural surrounding. But what we wanted to do with this project was to really systematically gather the impacts those outdoor sports bring together, and also to create a system of measuring this impact they bring. So we created the BOSS project, and it was an Erasmus project. So now the presentation stopped. Sorry. And it was built upon 4 stages. So the first stage was a literature review, where we wanted to gather all the benefits and costs of outdoor sports systematically, and also the system of measuring them. The second step was to create a system for testing the benefits and costs. And in a third step, we wanted to test this system in real life projects. So to really test it in the field and get a feeling if it's working. And the last step, the 4th step, was to create a toolkit so that everyone can use it. Sorry, the presentation is not working. Okay, now you can see those were the partners that were involved. It was 11 partners from 7 nations, and yeah, with all different roles and different focuses. So it was not only a scientific project from universities, it was really, had a lot of partners from the practical side too. Yeah, so what does the literature tell us, or what is the evidence base of the benefits that are related to outdoor sports? We had a look at the scientific evidence, let's say, first, and created a search string to search a lot of databases. It was a really big search in 7 different countries. The search string was translated in different languages, so that we did not only have a look at the English-speaking studies. And so we created a really big prime sum of studies, which was over 17,000 studies that came up during the search. And from this primary sum, we could identify 133 studies that were relevant for the topic, and those were extracted and analyzed. And yeah, the evidence base was gathered. So in your opinion, what is your feeling? If you now think about outdoor sports, what do you think is the most important benefit that comes into your mind when you think of being active in a natural protected area? So you can give a quote here. There's no right or wrong, just be spontaneous and give us a feedback what you think it is. I hope it is clear what we mean. So yeah, physical health, mental health is quite clear. Education, so personal, but also interpersonal development of people. And of course, yeah, environmental effects. We are always talking about connecting people to the natural environment again. And the last thing would be the community benefits, which all includes, yeah, volunteering, inclusion, identity with your community. just to give you some examples. So I think we can close the survey. We have a clear winner, which is the mental health benefits. So, and if we now have a look on the results that we found, sorry, again, it's not working. Yeah, so you can see most of the studies we found, over 70 studies, 73, dealt with mental health and well-being, followed by education and lifelong learning, with over 50 studies, followed by physical health, and yeah, active citizenship, crime reduction, and pro-social behavior were not so much researched. This does not mean that this is the most important one. It just seems that most of the interest lies in this area. So let me give you just some more examples of what's in there. When we have a look at the physical health benefits, I think this is really obvious. Yeah, it's important that we are physical active to fight a lot of major diseases like cancer, heart attack, and so on. And when you have a look at the studies there, you find really good quantitative studies that give you a lot of detail. Like if you're being active by cycling, you can reduce your risk of suffering or getting a heart attack by 11 to 18%. So this is within these studies, you get a lot of detail how you can get benefits from being active outdoors. If we move on to the mental health benefits, our winner from the survey, we also see that there are lots of benefits included. Outdoor sport help prevent and cure a lot of major diseases, with one prominent example like depression. So for example, adults with a low level of physical activity are over twice as likely to suffer from depression. So here we also found a lot of studies with lots of detail in here. Important for you, I mean, if we talk about mental illnesses, we always think about older people or those who are living in cities and have a lot of stress and they are not managing to get outdoors. It's also important for kids. So one other example would be outdoor sports are also used for children with hyper activity, so ADHD, and they're used for a non-drug treatment for children. So last example to give you some insight on the studies we found here would be education and lifelong learning. Outdoor sports provide a great environment for young people to learn something about themselves, but also for groups to interact with each other, and of course, which is really important for us, to connect people with the environment again and to learn something about nature. 18 studies within our search dealt with the effects on environmental awareness, attitude, and behavior. And one example here was that, yeah, people or children that had contact with wild nature before the age of 11 also were associated to be more environmental aware or have more environmental friendly behavior when they're adults. So this gives you some insight on what we found. I cannot go too much into detail here. If you want to have a look at this, it's all on our website. There are a lot of long reports and also short ones for those who are not so much into reading. So all those resources, the infographics on the benefits, and also a list of all the studies we found with a short explanation are to be found on our website, and you can have a look at this on your own. Yeah, you also find on the website the downloadable toolkit and the results of the 12 case studies. So this is it from my side, just to give you a little bit of impression on what we found within the literature review. How we're going to use this will be the content of the later speeches. So thanks from my side. So I'll hand over to Miles Richardson, who's hopefully there. And Miles created a system of testing for the nature connectedness. So one of the things we were trying to find with how to measure the benefits and also the costs of outdoor sports were like standardized question banks. And one standardized set of questions was developed from Miles Richardson. So I'll give over the floor to him.
Okay, hi there. Yes, I've just arrived. Perfect timing, hopefully. Yeah, I will just share my screen. I think that's probably the best way to start. Get my slides up, and then I shall introduce myself. So that's the screen I would like to share, and I will just press the slide view. There we go. So I presume that's working okay. I'll soon hear if it's not. Yes, I'm Miles Richardson. I'm a professor of human factors and nature connectedness at the University of Derby. And you can follow what I do on social media via Twitter, and I've got a blog as well. You can see the address there, and the address for our research group. I lead the nature connectedness research group at Derby. And I'm going to talk about nature connectedness, mainly an introduction to it because it might be a new concept, and that will lead you to think why you might want to measure it. And the measuring is relatively straightforward, and I'll point you towards some resources to help measure it at the end. So I think you'll be well aware of some of the reasons that our relationship with the natural world can be seen to be failing, sadly. We have a warming climate, we have wildlife loss and biodiversity loss, and I'll come on more to this figure of 61 lately, but that is the mean level of nature connectedness in the UK through a national survey using the measure that we developed. And that matters as well for mental well-being. There's a good body of evidence that nature connection and a relationship with nature matters for well-being. So, just a brief summary of what nature connectedness is. The main thing to get across is that it's different to contact and visits to nature. There's a massive body of research that looks at contact and visits to nature, and that's a good thing. So that's good. But nature connectedness is a psychological construct. It's internationally recognized, and it describes a person's relationship with the natural world and how close that relationship is. From an emotional perspective, how close they are, but also starts getting into your sense of self and whether you believe you're part of the natural world. It is measurable. We're using carefully designed psychometric scales where you have a number of items and you ask people to complete them, and you come up with a score. And it's malleable. We found that we can increase nature connectedness, so that's good. So that you can make people feel closer to nature, and it's becoming more important around the world. With the Gallup World Poll, we've just done a paper where they're considering adding nature connectedness to their world measure of well-being. So it's been seen as an important concept to measure. And there's just a note there on the UN Convention on Biological Diversity recommended an increased focus on nature connectedness after a report that we wrote a couple of years ago, I think. So people are becoming aware of nature connectedness. And that's kind of indicated briefly in this chart. So that shows 2001, there wasn't any research papers that used the phrase nature connectedness. And then it trickled along a bit until 2010, 2011. And then you can see the amount of research in this area has grown really rapidly. So why has it grown rapidly? Because it matters for two key outcomes. So it matters for well-being, mental well-being specifically. And there's now been enough research, there's been 50 studies that we gathered together, 16,000 people took part. And broadly, a close relationship with nature is good for feeling good and functioning well. So feeling good, things like vitality and happiness. Functioning well is meaning in life, living a worthwhile life. So that's the first reason that nature connectedness matters. The second reason it matters, potentially more, is that there's a strong and robust relationship now, another systematic review that shows nature connectedness causes pro-environmental behaviours. So they found a causal relationship, McKay and Schmidt did when they looked at this last year. So that's the other reason. And it provides a different approach. Quite often when we're talking about engaging children with nature, an educational approach has been taken. And there was a nice study that highlights this out a few years ago that looked at children's environmental education and their environmental knowledge, and then looking at the children's ecological behaviour. And they found that environmental knowledge and education explained 2% of their ecological behaviour, but their relationship with the natural world explained 69%. Just one study, but it kind of gives you a flavour of the difference between taking a knowledge-based perspective as opposed to a kind of relationship-based perspective. So back to measuring nature connection. This is some work we did with Natural England in the UK and several other partners, and we did a national survey through the government statistics. So it's stratified sampling and all that kind of stuff that you need to do to make it robust. And we looked at 5,000 people in England and Wales, and we measured their nature connectedness using our NCI, Nature Connection Index. They just asked 6 really simple questions. We developed a new measure because some of the psychometric scales are a little bit esoteric at times, so it kind of could confuse people a little bit. And we wanted a measure that was suitable for children and adults. So it asks very simple questions. And what we found is, as I've said, 61 was the score for the nature connectedness for the population. It was on an index from 0 to 100. And to put that into context, the people in that same survey who reported that they did nothing for the environment and weren't particularly concerned or bothered about it, they scored 47 on their nature connectedness. The people who did a little bit, which is the easy things like recycling, because that's relatively straightforward nowadays because there's provision for that, they scored 63. But the people who did more, who cared more, and kind of went out of their way to do things for nature, scored 76. So you can see how the closer your relationship with nature, the more you do for nature. It also enabled us to do a measure across the lifespan. So we could look at the level of nature connectedness from 7 up to over 75, when people in their 90s responding. And we found this teenage dip, which one may well expect to find, but it's nice to have the data as well. There's lots of things going on in your teenage years that matter to you more than the natural world, perhaps, and it's a time for establishing your own identity, and your relationships with others become really, really important, and you're establishing them rather than a relationship with the natural world, perhaps. So you can see it starts reasonably high, then drops quite steeply, and then takes well, a decade or more to recover back to levels that still aren't particularly great for a sustainable future. So still a lot of work to be done. And that study's been replicated by other researchers in the UK. It's also been found in Canada, and it's also been found in Australia. So I think it's quite a kind of robust feature of people's relationship with the natural world. So, go to the next slide. There we go. That survey also allowed us to delve a little bit deeper into mental well-being, because it was, as I say, 5,000 people across England, and it was done very robust survey in terms of getting a good representation of people. And it also asked lots of other measures, and we were able to compare nature connection with nature visits. And that's really interesting, because there's a lot of research that shows time and visits to nature are really good for you, but they've tended not to measure relationship with nature. So then you've got time and visits becoming a proxy for relationship, because the more you go, probably the closer you are. But once you start measuring how close someone is to nature, it comes out that that's the really important thing for mental well-being. As you can see here with this green circle, that's the relationship to living a worthwhile life. And you can see that's a lot greater than the relationship from nature visits for living a worthwhile life. And quite amazingly, really, the benchmark, one of the government benchmarks for worthwhile life is socioeconomic status, spending power, and stuff like that. It was 4 times greater than that. So it's really quite a fundamental thing, your relationship with nature, and whether you feel like you're living a worthwhile life. And then what comes out for general health is nature visits matter, because obviously nature visits is probably more active, you're doing active things, and that's good for your physical health, whereas nature connectedness, that kind of relationship, doesn't impact particularly on your physical health. It might motivate you to go for a visit. So, and similarly, we found, we looked at pro-environmental behaviours and pro-nature conservation behaviours. We're particularly interested in pro-nature conservation behaviours because I think there's two key things to consider. There's habitat creation and supporting biodiversity, and there's reducing your carbon footprint and improving the kind of situation with regards to climate change and climate warming. And nature connectedness was important for those. So we found from that survey that nature connectedness was important over and above contact for a worthwhile life, pro-nature behaviours. And it's important construct in a sustainable life and a good life, as IPBES reported in their report last year. So we've started to talk about moments, not minutes. So we did some work with the National Trust, another survey across the UK, and we found that 80% of people don't really tune in to nature. They don't watch wildlife, smell wildflowers. 60% don't listen to bird song or notice butterflies. And in some analysis I haven't got time to go into, those things were really important to how close your relationship with nature was, and your well-being and your pro-nature behaviours. As you can see there, the people with a higher level of connectedness did 40 to 50% more than nature. So another aspect, or a key aspect of our work, is moving on from understanding the benefits of nature connectedness to interventions. How do you improve nature connectedness? And we developed the first intervention that led to sustained increases in nature connectedness, simply through asking people to notice the good things in nature. We ask people each day to write down 3 good things in nature, and when people do that, it increases their relationship and connection with the natural world, and it improves their mental well-being. We've even found clinically significant improvements in mental well-being from doing that task. And we've had research studies, 3-year research study that established that, and now we've released that task within a smartphone app. So we're trying to get it out into the public, potentially as a green prescription. So it's in the Go Jauntily app, which is available on iOS. So that allows people to curate their own walks, but also encourages them to notice nature along the way. So that might be of interest to some of you. The other way is to design your own interventions to improve nature connectedness, and that's where measurement comes back in. If you're designing your own, you want to know that they're effective, and so you might measure them before you start, after people have taken part in your intervention, and then ideally follow up sometime later. We developed the pathways to nature connectedness over a 3-year project, and they've been used by the National Trust in the UK. They've used the pathways to inform their visitor experience planning across all their properties in the UK, and for their 6 million members and I don't know, many millions of visitors that they get. And 30 Days Wild, which you may have heard of, is an initiative in the UK which asks people to engage with nature every day in June. That used the pathways to structure the activities that people took part in, the menu of activities that they took part in. And 1 million people have taken part in 30 Days Wild, and that increases happiness, health, pro-nature behaviours, etc. They're used by the New Zealand Department of Conservation and Durham Wildlife Conservation and various others as well. And that's a talk on its own, the pathways, but briefly, they're simply 5 types of relationship with the natural world. So a sensory relationship with the natural world, getting people to engage with it through sight, sound, touch, etc. An emotional or affective relationship with the natural world, creating activities and experiences where people can find the calm and joy that nature can bring. Activities where people can appreciate and engage with the beauty of the natural world is the 3rd pathway. The 4th pathway is meaning. Deeper and very many opportunities for considering what nature means to you. You can explore it through many areas, perhaps through the arts, in terms of poetry and painting and photography, and many ways of exploring how that nature is a meaningful part of your life. And then the final pathway is compassion and care, and that's doing things for nature, from feeding the birds in your garden to planting wildlife, friendly patch of flowers, to actively volunteering to conserve natural habitats. So that's the pathways, and we talk about, in the work that we do with various organisations, creating habitats for connection. And this can be green infrastructure, it can be spaces, it can be experiences where you prompt people and try to establish pathway related experiences and behaviours. You get people to engage through the senses, you get people to look at beauty and consider emotion and those types of things. So that's the pathways approach. So in summary from that very quick journey through nature connectedness and what it means and how you get there, I think what we've found, particularly over the past year or two, is that it's important in its own right for well-being and pro-nature behaviours. Almost a missing link that we've not considered too much before. You can think broadly of visits into nature for health, for physical well-being and connection for well-being and pro-nature behaviours, and think in terms of creating moments in nature using the pathways, and to encourage people to let nature be their story somewhat. And then I've got more information on the blog in terms of, this is the cover of our evidence summary, which summarises the pathways in greater detail. It covers our research in a little bit of detail, but what a new relationship with nature is and what it means and what we can do. And on the website, you'll also find information on one of the measures, the Nature Connection Index, which is the simple one, 6 items that asks simple things like being in nature makes me very happy. And there's the scale itself, the spreadsheet that allows you to to score it, and it weights it onto the 0 to 100 index. So that's on there as well, and more information about the pathways, as I say. And I'm always happy to answer questions on other potential measures as well. There's other ones that we use, the more esoteric ones, and then there's some simple ones that are even more straightforward that are quite effective as well. So that's my quick journey through. And I think, do we have a moment for questions?
Yes, we do, Miles.
Hi there.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. A lot of new insights, at least for myself. And I've seen some questions coming in through the chat for both you and Barbara. You're spot on as it comes to our planning. So thank you for that as well.
I've not had a chance to run through it, so that's good.
Yeah. Let's see. One of the first questions I saw coming in by chat, I think this one is still for Barbara. And it's from one of our speakers later on, Dom Ferris. Barbara, did you uncover any studies that looked at the combined effects of using outdoor sports as a sort of vehicle to take part in pro-environmental activities? And please unmute yourself when speaking.
Yes, already unmuted me. So what was it? Combining.
The combined effects.
Combination studies. We had some interesting studies that compared outdoor sports to indoor sports, but it was not focused on nature connectedness. It was focused on mental health then. There in this research field, there's a lot of interesting studies going on with Green Exercise Group. But yeah, you can see that there are a lot of things happening when people are in natural surroundings, like for example the stress hormones decrease faster than when you're in an outdoor surrounding or a natural surrounding, but we had no studies, I think, that focused on the nature connectedness, that compared from indoor to outdoor, when I remember it right. So the others also can give input there if someone remembers one interesting story.
Thanks for your answer, Barbara. There are two questions which are addressed, I think, for Miles, which both have to do with the teenage dip that we all saw in your graph. So here Mike McClure is asking about the teenage dip is very interesting. Perhaps outdoor sports can help to engage teenagers with the natural world. And how could we do this most effectively? And on top of that, I think what Teresa says from the EUROPARC Federation, is that dip related to social media or video games or the kind of behavior that teenagers show nowadays? Or has it always been like this in other periods before we entered this sort of social media age of teenagers?
Yeah, I mean, would be really interesting to know. Unfortunately, we don't have the data before. People weren't measuring it before as to whether it's got worse. What we do know from other studies that have looked at the appearance of nature in song lyrics, in books and films, that's been going down decade on decade since the 1950s. So nature means less and less in our lives. So people don't sing about nature as much as they used to. And that analysis has found that those dips in references to nature were steeper when new technologies came on board. So whether it was colour TV or video games in the 80s and etc. So I think there is a link. There is a link to technology, and we've done some research that's found that people who use their smartphone more tend to have a lower connection to nature, and those who take more selfies have a lower connection with nature. Those who take pictures of nature have a higher connection with nature. But that was cross-sectional, so we don't know whether the phone causes that loss of connection with nature, or whether the people with a lower connection with nature tend to use their phone more because they're not outside doing something. So there's a few unanswered questions there. But in terms of the teenage dip and outdoor sports and activities, what's quite interesting is that there's some research that's looked at the kind of outward bound, for want of a better word, type experiences where you take teenagers out and get them hiking and doing lots of stuff out in the natural world. And some of those haven't increased nature connectedness, and people have been surprised that they thought they would. They've had other benefits, of course, building confidence and other outcomes which are highly valuable. But I think that's where you come back to the pathways as to how can you do an outdoor sport that perhaps taps into some of those pathways. And it might not be during the sport, it might be after the sport, and it's kind of or during the activity, as to, is there time to reflect, or is the briefing right after the sport all about the performance rather than about the environment and that they're in. So I think there's, if you can design outdoor experiences that tap into those pathways in some way, whether it's during or before or after, I think you can start to increase nature connectedness, as well as the other benefits that you might get from the sport, rather than having you might have a very focused activity like mountain biking, where you're doing a black run and it's very technical and it's very focused. How might you bring some of the pathways into that experience as a whole once you've finished that experience?
Yeah, because I was wondering if technology could also bring an advantage for increasing our nature connectedness. While you never know which way we're going, but with augmented reality and all kinds of technical solutions that help us also to learn and appreciate the environment maybe more than we do right now. I don't know which way it goes, but maybe it's not only turning against us, but maybe there are some possibilities to use it for the.
Yeah, and I think technology is here to stay. We can't make it a negative thing. We've got to embrace it and use it in clever ways to make people think about their relationship with the natural world. And that's, I suppose we're doing that in some ways with the app that we've developed. But the trouble is, we're trying to create an engaging experience on a smartphone, which gets people to enjoy nature. But Twitter and Facebook and Candy Crush are about 10 years ahead of us of engaging people in quite an addictive way with their technology. So we've got a big fight in terms of kind of marketing and getting people tuned into the natural world.
And we haven't found a solution yet to get people addicted to nature?
No. So, I mean, we've just finished judging the Tuned Into Nature Music Prize, which was a prize for 16 to 29-year-olds, just to start to try and impact on that younger age group by encouraging people of that age to celebrate their relationship with nature in ways that their peers will listen to. I can do a talk like this, but I can't do a hip hop rap, clearly. And that's what we got through the prize, and people talking in modern ways about their love of the natural world. So I think it's using technology and in whatever form you can to celebrate how important nature is, without it drifting into some of the portrayals that you get of the natural world. Sitting cross-legged and meditating, which is fine, but it's not going to appeal to some, or it's a world where you wear a Mac. It's got to appeal to a broad young audience.
Yeah. There's another question from Fernando Pinidos. You also mentioned that the pattern of nature connectedness is present in different countries, for instance, Australia. However, is it known to change between countries and cultures, or is it everywhere the same?
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I've been lucky enough to see some research that's been conducted. It's currently under peer review, so it's not been released yet. And that has done a survey of nature connectedness using the same instrument across perhaps 20 countries around the world, and there are big differences. And what's really interesting is that the lowest levels were in the English-speaking, perhaps former British colonies. So the UK, America, Canada, Australia, levels were really low. There was areas in the continental Europe which were high, from memory, places like Portugal perhaps, and then out maybe more Eastern Europe. So where there were very much higher levels of nature connectedness. So it does vary, and it will vary culturally as well. I mean, there are cultures where there is no word for nature, because why would there be? Because it's part of who we are. It's not another. So yeah, big cultural differences which we're only just becoming aware of, and then once we're aware of them, then it's asking the question, well, why?
Thank you for your answers. There's one other sort of question. I'm not quite sure if I understand it well, but the question is there any overlaps with heritage and culture? Not quite sure how to interpret it, that one.
Yeah, I think yes, there is. In terms of, I was saying that the references to nature in cultural products, in our songs, in our fiction, in our books, in our films, is reducing. So nature means less in our lives, and that cultural aspect is massively important, and that's probably why you get those differences between countries where culturally nature is more important. It might be celebrated more, and it's seen more as an important part of who people are, or that it matters to them and in their lives. So yeah, and I think cultural aspects such as the arts are really important ways of exploring those pathways as well, in terms of when you look at those pathways immediately, you think, oh, you could explore those through artistic pursuits. The trick is the arts aren't for everybody. How you can explore those pursuits through other means as well.
Thank you. We got one more time. I had a question for Barbara as well. After the BOSS project was finished and all the results have been delivered, how has this been received by cities, by policymakers, maybe even land managers? Do they see the whole, the evidence base that there is right now, that outdoor sports have social value, that you can capitalize on it? Does it help to raise awareness for making outdoor sports more accessible, for instance, or to invest in nature protection and facilitate outdoor sports recreation at the same time? Or is that something that we need to push a little bit more in the next few years?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to push this more in the next few years. I think it's too early to talk about the impact of the project itself. I don't know if policymakers already are really aware of the results. I think we would have to ask more the ones that have presented it in Brussels and on the last conferences where we had a lot of politicians also, and also from the European level. I think within the scientific audience, people are quite happy to have like a evidence base where you can bring all those different sides together, because at the university it's always dangerous to get a little bit in the tunnel and only see the one thing that is within your interest and focus only on some special effects. And so to once have this really broad view, I think gave us really good feedback from other institutes.
Thank you. Yeah. I think it's a good example as well that links quite good with the healthy parks and healthy people theme of EUROPARC. That the BOSS project and the reports could be really helpful to push that program as well and raise awareness for it. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Miles, for the inspiring presentations. We're moving on in our program, and we're going to take a look at 3 best practices, 3 examples of the BOSS project. The BOSS project in total had 12 real-life projects, and 3 of them will be highlighted, some by a short presentation, some by a video. I'd like to ask Edward if he can share his screen. Oh, you're right on it. And then I will quickly introduce the people that were involved in these projects. The first example that we're going to show is the Play and Train project. Involved in this project have been Marion Masdemont. She's the international projects manager at Play and Train, and Miriam Brochet. I'm not quite sure if I pronounce it well. Well, I do it the French way. And she's working at the National Institute of Physical Education of Catalonia in Spain. That example will be followed by the Crossing the Alps project, which will be shortly presented by our own board member and treasurer of ENOS. Where are you? Andreas, Andy Thoman. Andy works as a lecturer and researcher at the Technical University of Munich, and he's also responsible for the professional ski instructors education, and he's also involved in the mountain guides education. And the last one that we're going to show, that's the video of the Rode Yearn project. I think the introduction, or we're just going to show the video. And then we will go automatically to the presentation of Edward Ingles. Edward is also a board member of ENOS, but he's also the professor, teacher, and researcher at the National Institute of Physical Education of Catalonia. And he will take us through the process and the methods to ask the right questions and how to find out for your project what the benefits could be. And then immediately followed by our own chair, Mike McClure. Mike is the chair of ENOS, and he, in real life, if he's got time for that, after all his work for ENOS, he's also the Outdoor Recreation Development Officer at Sport Northern Ireland, and he was also involved in the Get Wet Erasmus project. And Mike will do a sort of wrap up. So he's going to focus on what it's all worth and how to generate the social value. But first, let's go back to Play and Train and give the word to Marion and Miriam. Edward, if you can start the presentation.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I need the presentation. Maybe it's Edward taking care of that. I can see now. Yes. Thank you, Edward. Well, thank you, Mark, for your introduction. Well, as Mark said, I am co-founder and project manager of Play and Train. Play and Train is an NGO based in Spain, in the mountains and in Canary Islands. So we are based in outdoor sports in mountain, like skiing, snowboarding, and hiking, all this type of sports in the mountain, and then surfing, stand-up paddle, bodyboard in the sea. Our main objective, we born in 2008, and our main objective is to facilitate people with an impairment and their families the right to practice and access to outdoor sports activities, because it's not that easy when you want to practice this kind of sports in outdoors. You need most of the times specific equipment or adapted equipment that needs to be perfect or suitable to everyone to have an experience and a good experience. If not, it could be a little bit a disaster. And then based on the 3 pictures that you can see in the slide, in the left side is surfing, as I said. Now we are running a camp at the moment, so you see kids around. Sorry for that. And then skiing, and then mountain biking or hiking. Okay. Thank you, Eduard. Yes, you can go. When Eduard contacted us to be part of the BOSS project, we thought that it was really, really interesting for us because we needed, in a way, to know the evidence how the impact to practice outdoor sports activity are in the participants and in their families. Because it's not the participants who's involved in the sport activity. Even the families can be part of the sport, practice together at the same time, families, friends, or whatever. And in a way, we needed to know a little bit more, to have like numbers to know how the impact of these activities, especially when they are practiced weekly, are in the life of the people with an impairment and their relatives. So continue the presentation. We will have it Miriam, because she was in charge of to do it all the research. But basically, we did this for we did in different with different people who practice these different sports: outdoor, surfing, biking, and snowboarding. The different questionnaires to have more or less the results. So I give the floor to Miriam in order to explain more deeply.
Okay, thank you, Mariona. Yeah, my name is Miriam. I'm a PhD student from INEF, from the University of Barcelona, and I'm going to present the main results of the case of study of play and train in the following slides. The research carried out has showed the social benefits that outdoor sports involve for people with disabilities. We could divide these benefits in 5 dimensions. The first one, in relation to the mental health and well-being items, the participants feel in good spirits or active more than half of the time. One of the most valued things by participants is the feeling of happiness when you are practicing, or the feeling of freedom in outdoor sports. The second one, in the education dimension, most of the participants have outlined the improvement of their autonomy, concentration, and discipline. Also, the results of the survey shows more knowledge about the equipment and meteorology. In social behavior dimension, the items with more punctuation were respectful with people around, taking care and sharing of the stuff. In active citizenship, most of the participants, more than the 70%, coincide in saying that outdoor sports have provided them some values that can be transferred to the daily life. For example, one of the participants says, "I think that sports in general has taught me many values, and these values can be applied but must be applied in the daily life." And finally, about the environment dimension, 80% of the participants affirmed that outdoor activities have improved their environmental awareness and their feelings towards the nature. For example, one of the participants says, "I didn't know anything about the problems of the planet before these activities. I am more worried about the environment now." Thank you very much.
We've lost the sound of the video. Sorry for that, but I think we're back again and ready to continue with Andy. Andy, could you take over and tell us a little bit more about the Crossing the Alps project?
Yes, thanks a lot, Mark. You hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, very good. Okay, so next slide, please. So Crossing the Alps was the project we had a focus on, or the project is a bit underestimated, I would say, because it's a big issue in the German-speaking areas to cross the Alps by foot, and so start in north of Germany or Austria or Switzerland, and cross to Italy. And we had the focus on different groups. The first part I brought, or the data I brought with you to you was from a student group which crossed the Alps for 1 week, and they were a guided group, and the key objectives or the things we looked at directly was we guessed was this intense contact with nature, then this intense contact with oneself and with his limits, because you have this altitude meters, all these altitude meters you have to do in 1 week, all this distance you have to cover, and so you will, if you're not used to it, you will go to your limits. And we guessed on interpersonal benefits and group dynamics. So there was a special focus on that, because if you have groups, so no individual hikers, there's a lot of things happening inside the group. And one thing we came up with was this idea: it's all your life in a backpack. So you have, for the 7 days, you have just your backpack with you and you have everything with you. So these were the key objectives. We had a look at it, and the next slide. We asked a lot of questions because, well, I'm from university, and this student group had to cope with all these questions, and this few of the questions or the answers we got. So we focus on the change through this week. It's not how they are actually, so it's how connected they are to nature, or how they feel in general. It was more or less, what is the change produced through this week? And so you see the data there. So there was a great improvement. So they 78% feel closer to nature through this week. There was a lot of learning. 100% improved their competences and skills in moving in nature responsibly, and 100% said that they learned something new about themselves. And there was a great focus on what is really important in life. So 70%, over 70%, that, okay, I think I know now what is really important in life, and it's not perhaps the cell phone, because they had no connection up there. Okay, next slide. And here is something, if we do measurements. So again, it was the focus on the change. So the uppermost row, I strongly disagree with the answer, or the question. In the middle is neither or nor, and at the bottom is I strongly agree. And you see that this action caused, or this week of hiking caused, for example, changes in actions they wanted to do. So what is a little bit of a pity, they don't want to do a bit more in nature conservation, so they to raise the engagement, raise in nature conservation. But we had a change in environmental responsible behavior, so a positive effect. They are more focused on responsible consumption. And what was, because of the resources there on this hike we had, well, you had to think about the resources you use. On the huts there is not so much water, so not so much electricity, so they have now a higher responsibility about using resources. And well, the other thing was neither or no engagement in voluntary work. So this is just a few aspects out of the big survey we did, but to give you an example how you measure the change produced through one of these actions you do in nature, and these were the answers. So you have to ask for the change. This was it. Thanks, Mark. Mark, I hand over to you or to Ido, if there are no questions.
Thank you, Andy, for sharing your story. The last case study we want to show is by video. So we're going to start the video. Rode urn. Edward, if you can please start final video. Thank you.
Row the Erne is a community organisation that builds and rows traditional boats on Lough Erne. Boats of this nature were used on this inland waterway during the Bronze Age. It was volunteers who brought the Columkill curragh, a 38-foot curragh, down in 2013, and we tested the water. And it was that group of volunteers that came together as a club in 2014 to actually lead and make sure the boat build actually happened. It's low tech, it's really easy to build. So anybody could land in that had no technical skills, never driven a nail, and get stuck in. On the build, the youngest was 5 years old and the oldest was 75 years old. It took 1,500 volunteer hours to build the boat. And in addition to that, we had 2 full-time boat builders. We had 60 people involved in the build, and we had over 12 volunteer groups. 2 or 3 of the people that we support that helped build the boat, they went on a weekly basis and helped with all the sanding and bending of the wood. It was all done in the old traditional way. We started to help to build the boat. It gets you out and about and stuff like that, and it's good learning. Different groups are coming out with you as well at various times. So it's wonderful making new friendships. All ages, right across, all abilities, disabilities, absolutely amazing.
Just experience going up and down the Erne, which we see every day and don't get the chance to do that, has been brilliant.
Push forward, then back, forward, then back. We got off and had a picnic. They were unfortunately carried back on the board again.
It's a beautiful place, and we do take it for granted, and the Row the Erne team have given us the opportunity just to see more and enjoy the waterways here in Fermanagh.
It brings a lot of people in to try rowing on the river and seeing water sports, which can't be a bad thing because the water's a great place to be.
An awful lot of people don't access the water. And when they get on the water, they're really surprised at the different view that it gives them of their locality, whether it be the town of Enniskillen or further afield. And they really enjoy that experience. And you can see them coming alive on the boat. When we launched this boat, we really didn't understand the magic that we were going to create. And now we're beginning to realise and reap the benefits of that. And we're very proud of that. And we're delighted to continue that.
And that was the final example of the BOSS project that we're gonna show by video. I would like to give the word to Edward Ingles, who's been part of the BOSS project team as well, and he's gonna tell you a little bit more about the evidence and how to measure your results, which is quite important. Oh, I'm back again. Asking the right questions. It looks really simple, but it's probably not. But Edward can tell you way more about it. Please go ahead, Edward.
Yeah, I'll try to. Many thanks, Mark, for this introduction, and well, many thanks to EUROPARC for this opportunity to participate in this conference and showing more about our project, and in my case, about our methodology. Well, I hope this can be useful to participants. In fact, that's the real objective of BOSS projects. So to become not only a big piece of scientific data or information, but also a tool to be applied and developed in other projects. So that's the idea of my piece of information, of my presentation in that case. And well, my presentation deals precisely with the methodology that we defined or designed in BOSS project to measure the social benefits of outdoor sports. And above all, to give you some tips or ideas to be able to apply that to your own projects with the aim of knowing the social benefits of that project. So let's talk about which are the right questions to ask and some examples on how to do it. Well, the first essential step for the evaluation of a project is precisely to clearly define the project. Of course, you will know very exactly in which your project consists of, but you have to define the participants of the project in order to design the tool to gather information. So you can have children, disabled people, elderly people, and so questions of a survey or of an interview will be conditioned by the kind of participants that you have. Also the duration or frequency of your project. So it can consist of a one-day event or a whole season or a longer time period project. So that will also condition the kind of questions. And finally, the environment or the type of activity. So depending on that, you can administer, for instance, a survey right after the activity or not. So you have to clearly define your project as the first step, and then decide how to gather the information or how to ask the participants about the benefits of your project. There are several methodological techniques in science or in research, but the ones that we have used and so that we recommend because we have to prove them in BOSS project is focus groups, the use of a survey, and also talking with key stakeholders in your project and in the surroundings of your project. And also information can be gathered by from one-to-one interviews, informal group discussions, telephone interviews. So you can also use this information. So the objective is to gather as much information as possible. And I'll go through with one example. So by presenting how we did that in the case of Play and Train. So one of the real life stories that Miriam and Mariona has talked about before. And we started by the use of a focus group. And the first step when you decide to do a focus group is to decide how to do it. You can see in the photograph our setting of a room in our university. And you have to answer these questions among others, but who should be involved? So we decided to involve in the focus group the participants and also their families, as Mariona was telling us before, so that we wanted to know the impact not only for the participants, but also for their families. So parents were in the focus group. How many? We decided to organize a total of 2 focus groups with 8 participants on each, 8 participants of the project and their parents, so their father, mother, or both. Where to meet? We decided to do it in the university because it's a calm place. We did it in Saturday where there are no students. So we had a very calm environment. And what to do is what I'm explaining in the next slide. Here there are the steps that we followed in the session of the focus group with each of the groups. We started by an initial incentive. So projecting a video and some images of the project, just to help the participants to look back and to place them into the activity, so to remember about when they were practicing. After that, we asked them to write down impacts that this project had generated them, so benefits. And as they had practiced 4 different sports, as Mariona has told us, so we asked to use a different color of a post-it to write these benefits for each of the impacts, using no more than 3 words for each of the impacts. After that, they had to classify them into the different BOS project dimensions, so physical activity, so for dimensions of the impacts, physical activity, relationships, social behavior, education, environmental awareness, and mental health and well-being. And finally, by the use of some color stickers, they had to rate that benefits, so that we can more or less had the most important, the second most important. And that was the first activity, just to create the ideal environment to let all the participants and their families, in that case, express themselves, as you can see in the photographs, and letting them speak about their benefits and how they had felt during their participation in the project, and also asking some questions like the ones you've got in the slide, if nobody was telling anything. So what was the most important impact? What did you gain most from being involved? What changed for you as a result of being involved? So questions like that, just to help the participants tell about their experience. And the second step after the focus group was to design a survey based on what we had gathered from the focus group and from interviews with experts. And we designed a survey based on these sections. Firstly, the demographics of the respondents, the health status of the participants in the project before their participation in the project and during the participation. Also the same with the physical activity levels, so frequency and intensity before and during the project. And finally, one section for each of the benefits dimensions, as you can see in the icon. So the BOS benefits dimensions, mental health, social benefits such as social relationship, education, environmental awareness. So one dimension, one section for each of these dimensions in the survey. I will show you some examples of questions just to give you an idea of in which the survey consists of. For the dimension on mental health and well-being, we used the World Health Organization Well-being Index, as you can see here. So it's a rating with different statements. The participant had to rate if they had felt all of the time, most of the time, or at no time, each of these statements. Here you've got an example. So that was one of the questions in the survey. We set it in the first column, some statements, so that the participants had to tell us if they had felt that all of the time or at no time. So rating that, I feel cheerful and in good spirits. I feel calm and relaxed. So you can see here some of these statements in terms of mental health and well-being. In other dimensions, we used a Likert scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree, is the case of education. And the kind of question was more or less the same. So we set it some statements to which the participants had to say if they strongly agree or not with these statements. So for instance, I have developed new physical skills after the participation in the project. I have learned to take care of the equipment, and some more statements as the ones you can see in the slide. And finally, we set it a general question at the end of each of these 6 dimensions. So for the mental health and well-being, physical activity, social relationship, education, environmental awareness, as the ones you can see here on the slide. So how much had this project affected to their overall and to each of the dimensions, education, mental health, well-being, on to all the dimensions that I have mentioned before. And here we can see, for example, the answers to this general overall question to participants in the Play and Train project. So we asked them how had activities, for the participation in the 4 sports of the Play and Train project had affected their respect for the environment. And here you can see the results. So as Miriam has told before in the explanation of the project, so there's nobody that had answered that the project has insignificantly or not at all affected their respect for the environment, and 34% of the participants told to have been affected in the respect for environment very significantly. And that was more or less the results for all the dimensions that we asked for. Well, these are the two main tools that we used to gather information about the benefits, the social benefits of the participants in Play and Train. And that slide is going to in general terms in the project. One of the outputs of the project is a question bank, where you can find all these questions that we have used to analyze the social benefits on each of the projects that we have analyzed. And you can find that in our website. Here we've got the link. And you can find there that the question bank. Here I've put it in a small piece just to show you in which consisted of. So you can take all the survey and adapt that to your project and use that to gather information about the social benefits in terms of the dimensions that we used in the BOSS project. And also in our website, another of the outputs is an analysis tool. So you can use our question bank and then put your own answers. So after having administered your survey, your adaptation of the survey to the participants of your project, you can put your results, the answers of your participants, into our Excel file, this analysis tool, and it will give you automatically this kind of tables and figures with the results of the social benefits of your own project by the use of these outputs of the project. And well, I hope that this short information has been useful for those of you who organize or who develop projects with outdoor sports, and that you, with that, hope you are able to evaluate the benefits, the social benefits of your projects. And if there's any question, hope that also, of course, me and also the other members of the BOSS project, INOS members, will be very, very happy to help you today and with your evaluation of social benefits. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Edward, for your explanation of your part of the project. Really helpful, I think. We're gonna save the questions for a little bit later. So we're going to Mike right now, Mike McClure, giving the word to him in a little bit of time to put on his presentation. And a roundup of what the BOSS project has delivered and how it could be interpreted and how to calculate the value. Mike, please go ahead.
Okay, can you see my screen okay, Mark? Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, folks. And it's really good to be here and be part of this EUROPARC conference. On behalf of ENOS, we're just delighted to be part of it. I am going to condense what is about a year's work and normally a 4-hour, 5-hour presentation into 10 minutes. So I had two options with that. Option number one was to speak really fast, but no one would understand me with my Irish accent. Or option two was just to condense the information really down. So this is very much a condensed version of something that is really quite a big element to any project. So we heard from a number of the case studies and from Barbara and from Miles indeed about the benefits that connecting people with nature through outdoor sports can actually create. And the surveys are ways to capture that information. But the bit that we were interested in as well was not just that, but what was it actually worth in monetary terms? How do you work out what it actually is worth? And the first stage of that was to really understand what the costs of a project were. In other words, not just what is it worth, but what does it cost to run that project? So throughout my presentation, I'm going to give you examples from the Row the Earn project, because it was one that I know very well. It's based here in Northern Ireland, and it's a small scale project. They've one boat, and they have about 30 members of their club, but they take a lot of different people out onto the waterway. So we looked at all of their costs for the year that they were involved in with us. And the total cost was quite low. It was only 6,340 euros. Their membership fees are low because they want to make it socially inclusive. So their administration costs, their volunteer time, their equipment costs were all kept to an absolute minimum. One of the things that you need to do really carefully when you're doing something like this is to be cautious of double funding. So let me give you an example of that. The local authority would have given Row the Erne a small grant of maybe €2,000 for their project. And they used that money to buy a lot of equipment. So they would tell us about all the different costs, and they said, well, we got a grant of €2,000 from the local authority, and then we spent €2,000 on the equipment. And we had to be careful that we didn't add the grant and the cost of the equipment together, because that would be much greater. It would actually be double counting. So you have to be cautious when you're doing any of this sort of work that you don't do double counting. So the total cost for the organization in a year was very small. It was just over €6,000. We then looked at all of the different benefits that they create, and we calculated the value of that to be just over €25,000. And that was through measuring the physical health outcomes, measuring the community outcomes, the amount of volunteering that went on, the mental well-being outcomes. And I'll talk a little bit about how you do that for each of these sectors. I'm really only going to touch the surface, so it's just to give you a little bit of an insight into it. So, for example, with the physical health outcomes, we know that if you participate regularly in physical activity in the outdoors, you have a reduced risk of cancer, cardio heart disease, type 2 diabetes, depression, and so on. The way to calculate the value is that you then look at the number of people who are involved in the project who aren't already affected by one of these conditions or diseases, and then you look at the amount of activity level that they do. And if they meet the World Health Organization minimum levels of physical activity, which is approximately 150 minutes per week, you can take that and multiply that by the cost of treating one of these conditions. So for example, if there's a 7% reduction in cancer by participants, then 7% of the participants get the full benefit of that. That's how you kind of work it out. All of this is caveated by whether or not they get all of that benefit through the activity. So for example, again, somebody might go rowing for only part of the 150 minutes, but might do cycling for another part. So you can't count all of the activity unless they do it all through that project of rowing. The health value generated then we found was about €5,000 in total. We then looked at some of the other outcomes. We looked at the environmental outcome and the community outcomes, and we asked other organizations what they would be willing to invest to deliver those outcomes. So we knew from Row the Erne that 100% of the participants felt that it was therapeutic to be out on the water and that they couldn't access the water by any other means. We also discovered that they felt much more connected to the loch and to the natural environment and were willing to do environmental projects as a result of that. So we asked two organizations, the Navigation Authority and a conservation body, the Landscape Partnership, what they would be willing to invest in other projects to connect people to the loch and to the water. And they described different amounts and different other projects that they had run. And we worked out that on average, the value that they would invest in a project like this for the number of people involved would be around about €10,000. So that's a way to show what the value is in terms of environmental and community engagement. And then we asked the participants themselves what they would be willing to pay to gain those outcomes that they got. I mean, one of the things that came out of that project was that they had a lot of participants who really struggled with mental well-being. And actually by getting involved in the club and getting out onto the water, they had seen a significant change in their mental well-being. Quite a few of them were clinically depressed prior to getting involved in the club. And we asked them what they'd be willing to pay to get that outcome. That was quite difficult for them because a lot of the people didn't have a lot of money. So they found it quite difficult to work out what they would be willing to pay. But one participant explained that she used to pay €60 a week just for therapy. And once she started rowing, she did not need to pay for the therapy. So that gave an idea of the value of it. We also asked them then to compare it with other things. So we said, if we take away that opportunity to be out on the water, we take away rowing, but we give you something else in exchange, would you be willing to swap those experiences of being out on the water and rowing to something else. So we started off with quite low values. So we said, if we give you a new iPad that you could be on Zoom meetings all the time and being at conferences like this, would you be willing to swap that for being out on the water? And of course, nobody would be willing to get a €400 value of an iPad in order to be out on the water. And we worked our way up. We said, well, what about if we give you a new television, or possibly a weekend away, or a holiday like a cruise, or maybe your mortgage paid off? So really high value things. And it was only when we got up into the very high value items, things like having your house completely paid for, or a new car or something like that, people started thinking, well, maybe I would consider swapping that. But actually, for the majority, they recognized that, you know, really very little would replace the experiences that they had with getting out onto the water. So again, we worked out that through that process, we gave a value of approximately €10,000 to those personal outcomes. And when we added all of that together, we find that the social value generated by the project was around about €25,000 against a cost of €6,000. Now remember, that cost was actually some of their own money in terms of membership fees or travel to events or equipment that they may have bought. The social value is not real money, it's just the value that it actually can generate. And this creates what we call a social return on investment ratio, whereby for every €1 invested, we got nearly €4 of value back to the participants, but also to the community and to society. So that's a very quick snapshot of the process that you go through to generate the value. As I said, it's incredibly complicated. It involves lots of engagement with the participants. It involves lots of research into what the costs of certain things are. So it's very much a long process, but it gives you some really good data in terms of economic value. And I know that many sort of statutory authorities now want to know, if they're going to invest money in a project, even if it's an environmental project, what is going to be the value? What are they going to get for that investment? So this is a mechanism where we can show that if you invest, you get a strong return on that investment. All of the information on that is on our website at outdoorsportsbenefits.eu. We'll put that in the chat at the end, and we can certainly make it available through EUROPARC Federation as well. I'm sure folk have questions, and we're more than happy to take those. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mike, for making a really difficult topic sound easy. Questions can be asked through the chat. There's one already in here for Edward. Question from Teresa was this survey only done to people with physical impairment or also to non-impaired people? And is there any differences of the answers obtained?
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Well, the survey was designed based on the information gathered by the systematic review done in the BOSS project. So we defined a question bank, and then each of the projects adapt that question bank to their own specifications of the project. In our case, from the University of Barcelona, we designed the survey for two cases. One was the Play and Train project. So we used that question bank to people with physical impairment with some adjustments. And then we use the same survey, but with some little adjustments to another project in Portugal with children with no impairments. So it's more or less the same. And we have done the validation of the survey, and there are only little adjustments, but it's more or less the same and based in the same question bank.
Okay, yeah. I have one question myself, which could be either answered by you, Edward, or Mike. I can imagine with this audience, with managers of national parks and protected areas, that they are particularly interested if you sort of copy-paste this mythology and use it to calculate the benefit of outdoor recreation in their national park or in their protected area. Here in this project, this is in a certain way, is a small-scale project kind of base. Could you apply this kind of methods and analysis tool on on the larger population as well. For instance, the number of people that are hiking in a national park, and then calculate the value.
Yeah, you can say, Mike.
So the short answer to that is yes, you can. It is possible to do. You need to think through the process very carefully whenever you're not working with a smaller scale project. When you're working on a larger scale, the toolkit can provide some guidance on that for folk. And it certainly, the principles that we used were called social value international principles, which is a recognized methodology for creating economic value. The bit that we wanted to do was get the bespoke questions that were most relevant to outdoor sports. But actually, a lot of those bespoke questions would be really relevant to the people who are accessing the natural areas and the protected areas as well. And certainly the stuff that Miles Richardson talked about, I think, would be something that you could use, and that's included in our tool bank. So, you know, there is opportunities to do it. And there are also ways to calculate the values, but again, you just need to be very cautious that you don't overinflate these.
So the BOSS project really focused on the benefits for society. Is it fair to say, and then I'm maybe being the devil's advocate here a bit, that there could be some negative impacts as well? There have been many reports during the last few months where more people are visiting natural spaces, leaving litter behind, etc. Is that something that you should put in this kind of module as well to balance it out a bit?
Yeah, so absolutely. We did call it the benefits of outdoor sports for society, but when we actually undertook some of the research work, we looked at any negative impacts that people might have. So for example, even on the physical health stuff, we discovered that while for most cancers, being active and physical activity reduces your risk, but actually for prostate cancer, certain activities can increase your risk. So, you know, that there are negative aspects, and the one that you've highlighted is something I think we've all faced in the last number of months, is just because people are accessing the natural areas without maybe any knowledge of how to behave. That is a massive problem, and you know, it's how you overcome that. What you can do, though, is use this methodology to track change and see how any interventions that you put in place might make a difference, to see how it changes people's attitudes and changes the impact that they may be having on a natural area.
Thank you for a clear answer, Mike. I don't see any additional questions at this moment, and we're still spot on if it comes to the timing. So maybe it's the right time to introduce a final speaker, and it's an easy bridge to the topic trash-free trails. The next speaker on is Dom Ferris. He's the founder and co-director of Trash-Free Trails, which is a non-profit organization. He was previously the head of communication and engagement at Service Against Sewage. So you almost think that he has something with litter and waste. Let's see if we can get Dom on the screen. Yes, Dom, there you are.
Maybe you have my audio, and I'll share screen now.
Yeah, you're loud and clear.
Desktop one, share that.
Thanks for joining us, Dom.
No worries. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. How are we looking?
Yeah.
Is that doing it?
Perfect.
Oh dear. I don't want to record it. Classic. Don't want me to leave meeting. Sorry, guys. This is the classic one. I'm sharing screen, but it's asked me to do some interesting things with Zoom now. So, desktop one. Forgive me for this.
I can try to take over from you, Dom, trying to put your presentation on.
Yes, thanks. Yeah. For some reason,
see if that works.
For some reason, it's just not. It's asking me to quit Zoom to share it with you, which is brilliant. It's been seamless until till the mountain biker comes in. There you go.
Okay.
All right. So I'll need to ask you to click, will I?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Hopefully everyone can see me and hear me. Is that correct, Mark, now as well? Or you can? So guessing everyone else is. Yeah. First thing I've got to do is say thank you for all the presentations so far. You've got kind of no idea how serendipitous some of the talks have been, particularly Miles, because I am perhaps tomorrow or the day after about to submit a master's by research proposal on creating cycling citizen scientists through studying litter impacts and volumes and nature connectedness. So I'll be badgering you, Miles, especially for more information. But I'll just come to the point of trash-free trails without going too much into detail on what we are. Is we're a very small UK-based but global kind of thinking community interest company. We formed in 2017, and we became a CIC early this year. And our mission, which is the first thing I'm expecting some kind of frowns upon, our mission is to reduce litter on mountain bike trails by 75% by 2025, and to reconnect people with nature through what we call purposeful adventure. And I've heard loads of amazing stories of what I would classify as purposeful adventure so far. Coming from Surfers Against Sewage, you guys might be aware of that, is that the chief exec there especially is a master of PR and a master of saying things that basically trap people into working out for you. So if you could click one on, that'd be great, Mark. Yeah. So 5%, I imagine the scientists of which will be saying, well, how are you going to measure that? First off is we don't know how much is out there. And secondly, how are you going to measure whether you've reduced it by 75%? So immediately the first question comes, what's our baseline? And how do we get a baseline? So that immediately strays into scientific territory. So we're a community organization, but we need to have scientific answers. The great thing is after 10 years at Surfers Against Sewage, have witnessed firsthand the benefits of co-creation and collaboration with community and science, and bringing them together can have some wonderful outputs for both parties. So for us, they're one and the same. So my master's is for me exactly the same as the Trash-Free Trails State of Our Trails report, which is what we call our hub project for the next 5 years. So it's the project around which all of our other projects will both revolve, but also be fed by and feed into. And I'll talk about that a little bit further on. And it's the way that we're going to establish what the causes and impacts of litter on our trails are, and also from 2022 onwards, 23 onwards, we're going to measure whether the things that we're asking people to do and the projects that we're implementing are actually having an impact, rather than just kind of guessing, which is something that in my 10 years at Surfers Against Sewage, I was personally guilty of. You have lots of instinctive knowledge about things, but now I would like to try and focus on having a smaller impact, but maybe a more measurable and more sustainable impact. So when I'm talking about the State of Our Trails report as a charity project, these are the three main aims of that project. So it will be to empower and equip trail communities to remove and record trail litter, which is the first and most important reason that I'm on this call with you guys, because I never come to a talk without going, right, well, how can I activate this audience to help us achieve both our project aims and our organizational aims? I mean, the audience that you've got and the expertise that I'm talking to is extraordinarily exciting from that point of view. So we need to figure out how we can empower and equip people. Only by doing that, because it's just me, as you might notice in the background there, that's my wall and a a very ramshackle cottage in Cornwall. It's just me at the moment running trash-free trails. So I need to make sure that we activate a really fantastic and powerful grassroots movement. Once we've done that, and throughout all of that, especially, again, you guys have talked about meaning. I really enjoyed that, Miles. Meaning, I call it, again, purpose, is that we need to have a purpose. We need to, if you ask someone to take action for you, I believe you need to let them know what the purpose is and provide that sense of purpose, enable them to see it. So once we establish the cause and impact of litter on our trails, we then intend to develop an action plan, evidence-based action plan, to sustainably reduce litter and create environmental stewardship communities. So if you wouldn't mind flicking on, please, Mark.
Yep.
So yeah, the question would be good, because I'm rambling a little and I haven't got time for you guys to, I'm not in front of you guys, but as with everyone, whether I was in front of you or in front of a group of 100 students in a local school, I'd be asking now, are you in? You know, do you value and love your mountain bike trails and wild places enough to consider donating your time, talent, passion, expertise, and networks to help us do that through our State of the Trails report? I'm hoping the answer might be yes from a few people. So the next stage would be how and what I'm asking for your help with. So yeah, the State of our Trails report is, as many of you might know as well, I mean, I'm in rarefied company, and that there is currently an almost complete lack of understanding of the impacts of plastic pollution on terrestrial ecosystems, especially in comparison to marine ecosystems. A good example would be the estimates suggest that 4 to 23 times more plastic escapes into terrestrial ecosystems, as does marine ecosystems, which Jenna Jambeck et al. Has at between 4 and 12 million tons a year into marine ecosystems. So already you're starting to think, wow, okay, we've got some big numbers there. That's one of the reasons we need to do it. We also know it instinctively. Anyone who uses our trails, especially in Britain, knows that litter is increasing, and that's been kind of amplified and magnified recently during the post-lockdown kind of hordes descending on our beauty spots. I've got different opinions about that, but we'll talk about it, especially when you consider the amount of plastics being made for other stuff. So we believe that the State of our Trails report is vitally important for us as an organisation and our trails and wild places, and we intend to create people-powered projects that fuel and drive the report. So we'll see in the next article, and also then by feeding all that information, feeding that information in to our, it's the one in between, there we go. So again, feeding that information into the State of our Trails, the State of our Trails report then reflects out, because it actually gives us evidence on what the best course of action would be, and whether an intervention method is working or not. The trick is that you can see there, that chain is people. We need people to be engaging with it and providing us that data. So the first one really is that, and I'm excited to say, because we've got some kind of preliminary data from our litter log, which I hope Mark has already shared with the IMBA community, and hopefully you guys will be interested in seeing too, is our litter log form, which we've been asking people to fill out across the world from their trail clean activities in just 1 month. So from July 15th to August 15th, we had 38 form submissions, and 76 participants took part. 82% of those were mountain bikers, and they removed they donated a total of 5,738 hours. They removed 1,538 items over 345 kilometers of trails, and that included 282 plastic bottles. So that's the litter data. And again, some of you guys might be asking a bit of a question, because the way we've talked so much about nature connection, a very, very important part about of trash-free trails that might make us stand out in comparison to other, more established marine conservation charities, is that we always want to try and understand and promote and talk about the yin to the yang of the problem. So the problem being plastic pollution on our trails, and the damage it's doing to ecosystems and our perceptions of these places, versus the yin of what these places do for us, which is so beautifully described through Nature Connection. So we've also been measuring people's feelings of nature connection and self-esteem. So the two numbers we've got for that so far is that 97% of people who have taken part feel proud of themselves as a result of taking part. And a really exciting one for us is 87% of the people who have taken part have said that they feel more connected to nature as a result, which is kind of what my question was to Barbara before, is that I have, after 10 years of running the beach cleans for Surfers Against Sewage, I noticed with my own eyes and my own heart, as someone who suffers with anxiety and depression, the little booster jab that you can get that isn't just being in these beautiful places that gives you this wonderful health and mental health boosts, but taking action to protect these places that give you so much adds this incredible booster jab, which is what I would be studying for my master's, and what really Trash-Free Trails is all about, is creating feelings of pride and improved self-esteem and nature connection will drive people's desire and to protect their environment, and most importantly, to become long-term environmental stewards. So yeah, full rabbit, as you might guess. I thought I would not practice this talk and I would listen to you guys and then respond to it. So it's gone a bit rambly. And the final slide, I'd love to talk to you more about these projects, is a really important one for me personally. And I think for all of us, especially if we all, I'm guessing a lot of us enjoy spending time in the outdoors, that one thing I've noticed, a phenomenon amongst those of us who take action to protect and study our interaction with the outdoors, is that we can sometimes forget to reward ourselves, to talk about the value of just putting your tools down and being out there. So I would kind of ask everyone on the line to make sure that you remember the wonderful Edward Abbey's quote of, just remember, be a part-time enthusiast, a reluctant activist, and remember to get out there and enjoy these wild places while you still can, while they're still there. So thank you. I hope someone would like to, some of you guys would like to engage with our State of the Trails report, submit data on the litter that you guys are finding in your wild places, and also tell us how that makes you and your networks feel. And I appreciate and very grateful for the time you've given me to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dom, for this inspiring presentation. I think people can find more information on trashfreetrails.org. We are about to finish. We got 1 minute left before another session starts at the EUROPARC conference. I would like to give the closing words to our president or chair, Mike McClure.
Good. Thanks very much, Mark, and thank you to all the different speakers, and especially to Miles, our guest, for coming on as one of our keynote speakers. As you guys can probably recognize from the national parks sector, we are passionate in ENOS about outdoor sports. We love to go biking, climbing, boating, hiking in protected areas and nature areas. That's a passion for us. But I think hopefully equally you've grasped that actually we are also passionate about the environment in which we go out in. We're passionate about the biodiversity that we can experience when we're out there. We want to see people behave and act responsibly. And I think that last presentation just sums up, and very much big thanks to Dom for that. The passion that there is amongst outdoor people to connect back and do something back for our protected areas. We're not always good at it, and we put our hands up that sometimes we don't always do it. And also there are lots of people who maybe don't understand what the issues are and how to behave responsibly, and that's something we need to work at. I think outdoor sports can provide real opportunities to connect people to nature. But one of the things I took from Miles was that we don't just want to put them in nature. We don't want to just provide visits, but we want to provide pathways to that nature connectedness. So I think there are further opportunities for us to work in partnership between ENOS and EUROPARC to see how we do that. What is it that we can do? And we are hoping to develop an environmental education program for instructors and leaders. We've applied for a project for that in partnership with EUROPARC, and that's one of our next steps. So hopefully in maybe a year's time or 2 years' time, we'll be coming back with more good news about those sorts of things. Thanks again to all of you for coming along and being part of our workshop. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the places that you guys look after. And so we hope to see you again in the near future. So from ENOS, thanks a lot and hope to see you soon. I'm going to hand over to Teresa for the final words. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mike and Mark, for this session. I take your word. I hope that the next year we will come back with good news, and hopefully we're going to get this Erasmus project that we have applied. And I just want to say to the rest of participants that now we go back to the plenary. The president of EUROPARC is making a closing notes from today, and then at 7:30. And you are all invited to a social event, social evening. Grab a beer, and we will have a quiz with prizes. So please feel free to come along. You need to go to the conference website and click on the link. Thank you very much and goodbye.